welcome to the People's Podcast, Winning Hand, where we talk about Marvel Champions, and we do it one card at a time. We have something very special for you today. Not a card, but also starts with the letter C, and it's not Cookie Monster. It's Caleb. Caleb Grace is here. Welcome.
Hi.
As always, my name is Boomguy. I'm here with Leethus, and we are just going to have a conversation with Caleb about all things Marvel Champions, which I think our audience is very excited to hear. Before we start that, why don't you introduce yourself, Caleb, and tell us a little bit about you and what you do and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm Caleb Grace. I'm a senior card game designer at Fantasy Flight Games. I've been with the studio for 13 years already, which is kind of crazy to think about. So I understand we're celebrating a 5-year anniversary for Marvel Champions, and that's just like the latter part of my career at this point, I guess. So yeah, that's just wild to think about. This wasn't something I ever like really looked for or planned for. I just kind of ended up here, and it's worked out okay since then.
Yeah, I would say so. I looked you up on Board Game Geek. I'm sure you know Board Game Geek.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 132 games to your credit on your profile. Did you know you have a profile on Board Game Geek?
Yeah. I'm just vain enough to Google myself occasionally.
I love that about you already.
Just to see, like, you know, what's out there. And it turns out you're going to find either like an okay game designer or a country singer. And I'm not the country singer. So.
Well, the podcast just took a turn. I was going to ask you about your latest album. Sorry.
The alter egos right there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I was curious. So I went through all 132 titles, and it turns out there's really only 4, because 96 of them are Lord of the Rings LCG products, and every single individual product is listed as a game, and then a bunch of them are Marvel Champions. 34 of them are Marvel Champions products, and some of those are like Hero Pack 1 and 2 that I don't think were released in the States that have like 5 heroes in them. You're listed on there, so technically like Captain America's twice. Anyway, you also have 2 other games, which are your more recent titles, Star Wars, the deck building game, the first one, and then the Clone Wars kind of standalone expansion that came out.
Yeah.
You also have 1 artist credit. Were you aware of that?
No, I don't believe that's accurate.
Is that a mistake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never even contributed a doodle.
Okay. I was going to ask you about it. It is the Dream Chaser reprint from last year, the reprint of all that content. You have an artist credit in there, and I was going to ask you about it, but it's too bad that's a mistake.
That's bizarre. Maybe there's a country singer and an artist out there.
And all we got was you.
Just a mistake. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
It'd be cool if, like, in the corner of the manual, there's like a little crayon scribble drawing.
Yeah,
like,
right?
Yeah, like
Your
Deadpool style, like taped over it and just use Sharpie. Okay,
yeah,
well...
No, Board Game Geek, I've noticed, has occasionally, I think it's, it's just like anybody can contribute it. So they often get details wrong. Like, for a long time, I was listed as, like, one of the designers on the Lord of the Rings like core set alongside Nate French, and that was just completely inaccurate. It's like he designed that game long before I even came to the studio. So sometimes people just get overzealous. So
we get excited.
Yeah. Or if you guys want, you can start a rumor that I'm secretly on there, like giving myself credit for things. Like, I designed that with Nate, and I drew the cover for the Dream Chaser cycle.
I love that. It also says that you are the creator and current designer of Star Wars, the deck building game, which is true. It says he was co-creator and senior designer of Marvel Champions for 5 years. That's in the past tense. Is there something we don't know here, Caleb?
Again, people just kind of write what they want, I guess.
All right, fair enough. I thought maybe we're going to get a scoop there, but we'll move on. So the thing we ask all of our guests when they come on the show, players or designers, as we kind of go through some quick hit favorites. So I want to ask you, what is your favorite hero to play in Marvel Champions as a player?
Oh, it's probably still a toss-up between Cyclops and Captain America. I'll probably just keep giving that answer forever because they're my favorite heroes in the comics, and I, when they're your favorite heroes you've grown up with and you're the designer of the game, you kind of get to make them play the way you like. So
Yeah.
turns out I like playing them.
And they're kind of like leaders of their teams, so there's some through. Favorite aspect to play?
I think it's leadership, just for the fact, I tend to gravitate to the leader characters. So both Cap and Cyclops came paired with leader aspect. I like them all, though. It's fun. I really enjoy the variety of, you play leadership for a while and you get a little tired of doing the same thing. So it's fun to be able to all right, now I'm going to play aggression, right? So I could say leadership, but it's not like by a wide margin.
Is there one that you think is stronger than the others? Like as a player?
I know what other people think is stronger, but
well, I'm asking you, Caleb.
Yeah, no, I don't really think so. I think it's so kind of like these questions feel very closely related in my mind, because I think it's important as a designer not to have like a favorite sphere, or aspect, so that you don't favor it too much. So I gravitate toward leadership just because of the idea of leadership. But as far as the aspect itself, I enjoy designing for all four of them pretty well. And so to say, is there one that's stronger than the other? Yeah, people will, whatever I say, someone's going to get mad and they're going to be like, oh, he's wrong, and I'll prove it mathematically. But the reality is they're coming from a certain perspective when they say that. Like, a lot of commentary comes primarily from solo players. And some of the aspects just shine better in multiplayer. Like, I would say protection is something that when you're playing solo, you might not play as much protection because your damage output is limited, or you're maybe not going to be as good at thwarting. But in a multiplayer game, boy, everyone's happy to have a protection player at the table, and it just makes the team that much stronger. So it's important to keep in mind, and we have to as designers, that the game is really 4 different games. It's 1, 2, 3, and 4 player count, and each experience is unique. So what's the most powerful depends what count you're playing at, right? And it can even depend on what hero and what scenario. So there's a lot of variables to that question.
What's your favorite player count to play at?
2, maybe 2 or 3, depends on the group. I don't enjoy it as much solo, and 4 just gets a little long for me. And that's not just Champions. That's like any game I've ever played. Once you add that 4th player, it's like, why don't we just play 2 separate 2-player games?
Yeah, that's real.
But I appreciate there's so many 4-player groups out there that swear by it, and we make a point of recruiting those groups in our playtests so that we have that perspective too.
It does still produce some really fun moments.
Oh, absolutely. Like when we have Con of the Heroes out here, I like to join in the 4-player games. Like if I get invited to I'll sit down and join, and it is really fun because there's all this energy about it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Or maybe I'm not with you, but I think if there's 4 people, I'd rather just play 2-player games and then like switch who you're playing with so you get to play with everybody. But 4 just can drag, I think. Do you have a favorite encounter?
I saw that on your list and I was like, boy, that's a tough one. Like, again, for so many reasons. So I'll just go with Cult of the New, and I'll say that I found myself gravitating toward the last Apocalypse scenario. The Unsabanur with the trifold villain. And I think it's because I spent a lot of time trying to make these really epic scenarios, like Magneto or the first Apocalypse, where, you got to overcome all these challenges before you can actually get to the final boss fight. And I really like those kind, but it's fun to have like a palate cleanser where it's like, how about we just have a quick, down and dirty kind of fight.
Oh, yeah.
But you still want something slightly new. Right? Some like what's different about this fight versus the other one. So the trifold thing was really fun for me to explore.
Yeah.
And so I like playing that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. And if you're sick of playing one, you need a palette cleanser, you can always switch up mod sets. So my last question is, do you have a favorite mod set that you play?
Gosh, that was another deep dive. I had to start looking up. There's so many mod sets in the game now, right?
I don't think I have a favorite.
Yeah. So my journey with mod sets, though, is it's at least interesting to me, because initially I wasn't sure how excited our fans would be about mod sets. I definitely saw the value of them, but I kind of thought that would be like, like I know they're there and I know I can change them, but I never do, which I understand that is how some people see them. But for the people who like them, boy, they really like them, and that got me excited to see that response of like, oh, I put these mod sets in this scenario, it's completely different. And at one point, I know we did the Hood scenario pack simply as a vessel for as many mod sets as we could put into one of those packs, and that really won me over. So with every expansion I did after that, I really made a point of trying to put more exciting mod sets. So with Age of Apocalypse, there was a couple that I really like thought about. I know there's the Clan Aqaba again in that last Ansabanur scenario where it's, you have this side scheme that just sits in play and collects threat, and if there's too much on there, everybody's got to reveal a card. And so what I found is I like the mod sets that present you with a twist, a different challenge, like the Sentinels from Mutant Genesis with the what is it, Operation Wide Awake, or whichever one it is that it's capturing the allies when they're defeated. Like I really dig that one too.
Yeah, those are really good. Recently, I've been going back to the Guardians a lot, and I've been playing a lot of the Band of Badoon mod set, which just has stacked full of minions, which is great. And I really like that one. It's a campaign that divides opinion, I'll say, but there's definitely some good parts about it. So my next question, before we get into like the specific stuff, is like, what made you want to work in games? Like, how did you get here?
I needed a job.
I feel that, man.
It's funny because that's honestly kind of how it happened. It only made sense in retrospect. But I was working as a teacher at the time, and if you know anyone who's worked in education, there's so much turnover from spring to fall. And I just, it was one of those situations where, my number was up and I needed a new gig, and I was applying everywhere and wasn't getting much calls back. So then my brother mentioned, hey, I'm working as a copywriter here at FFG, and they got a design position open. Maybe you want to apply. And I thought, why not? And then I was lucky enough to get called in for an interview. And after the interview, I was like, boy, I hope I get that. Those were just really cool people. That looked like a lot of fun. And I was lucky that they did offer me the job. And, once I got it and I started like talking to my coworkers about their experience, how they ended up, it was a lot of common things that I had in common with them. I didn't realize, like, we were always the kids making up the games for the neighborhood friends, or, collecting X-Men cards and looking at the stats on the back and imagining how we could make a game out of them, or, all kinds of stuff that I just never thought seriously about it as a kid. I never went, oh, I want to do this when I grow up. It was just something I did for fun.
Man, talking about those cards, I remember like there used to have the ones that had like energy projection, I think is a stat. You're like, what does that even mean? But this one has a higher one, so you're trying to figure out some justification for that, and that was fun.
Yeah, I've got the complete like Marvel Series 3 and the X-Men Series 1 like on the shelf, like behind me.
Nice.
Been holding on to those since like the mid 90s.
It's just a real nerd at heart.
Oh, absolutely. Love it. Yeah, it was funny too, because getting the gig was like all these things that were just like nerdy obsessions of mine suddenly like turned into business skills. Like having all this comic book knowledge. Yeah, suddenly like that is legit part of the reason I ended up on Marvel Champions, was because I had this just ridiculous knowledge of all these superhero characters that I grew up reading about.
That's awesome. And you have worked on 2 pretty major nerdy IPs now. Pretty like
3
foundational nerd stuff. I guess now the third one.
The big 3 for me, really. Yep.
Yeah.
As a kid,
for most people, or
if you took a snapshot of Caleb in the late '80s to the '90s, it was Marvel, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Like that was it. I mean, I also really dig Star Trek. Watch The Next Generation. With my dad growing up, like that was great, and I love Dune. So it's not like these are the only ones I like, but they were definitely the big 3 for me in my formative years.
10-year-old Caleb is proud. He's very happy. So what's kind of the difference for you working on Lord of the Rings LCG and Marvel Champions? And Like, what lessons did you learn from Lord of the Rings that you brought to Marvel Champions?
Sure. Well, the difference is easy. Lord of the Rings, by the time I started working on it was already well established as, narrative driven, like adventure game where you're going on a quest, and the stakes are always high and the chances are always slim. Really trying to immerse people in that story. Where Tolkien, he coined his own word, and it's escaping me now. But that it meant like this joyous victory out of certain defeat, right? And it's killing me as a Tolkien fan that the word's escaping me right now.
You'll remember it as soon as we're done.
Exactly. But in any case, it was just, you had to make each adventure feel like, how in the world are we going to do this? So that when you did win, you're like, oh my gosh, that's just what it was like in the books. Like Frodo and Sam never thought they'd make it to Mount Doom. Aragorn never thought he'd make it to Minas Tirith in time. And yet somehow it all worked out. That's a very different experience from Marvel Champions, and Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics, you have some moments like that, but it's often more of just like Spider-Man quipping with the bad guys while he hands their butts to him, or Cyclops just showing off like why he's the leader of the X-Men, and being like, we've already drilled for this in the Danger Room. We got you beat 5 minutes ago, and you're only realizing it now. So just thematically, it was like two totally different experiences that we were trying to craft. Mechanically, I feel like my journey at FFG has been a journey from like high complexity to more simple mechanics. And, through Lord of the Rings to Marvel Champions to Star Wars, the deck building game, I think I've come to just value simplicity a lot more, and let a lot of the excitement and everything just come from how the cards combo, and less about figuring out what the card does. Because I think early on, I was, especially in my early days on Lord of the Rings, I was just really excited to like, oh, I could like create this location that represents this moment in time and this thing. But to do that, I would have to put so many words on that card for, to actually get it to do all of that. And of course, as a designer, I'd be so excited about like, this is great, everyone's going to love it. And then it gets out there into the wild and people are like, yeah, it was a fun scenario, but I'm just exhausted from reading all those cards and discerning what they all do. And that was kind of tough to hear, but good to hear, like you have to embrace that stuff and learn from it. So, yeah, I would say the biggest thing I took from Lord of the Rings to Marvel Champions was like just trying to really simplify things and make it go much quicker, much snappier, both to be more appropriate to theme, but also to try to make the game more accessible.
When you say that, that actually makes me think of some of the kind of one-off hero cards that exist in Marvel Champions, where it does feel like this kind of cool moment for the character that a lot of times you just end up throwing that card away because the moment isn't right for it. So like Cyclops Full Blast is one for me, where a lot of times that card just doesn't work, but when it does, it feels awesome. It's like this is the shining moment you get this game, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and it's so true, right? Like it's not going to hit every time you draw it, but when you do, it just makes it that much sweeter.
Yeah. Are there any design ideas you had in Lord of the Rings that, like mechanically, that you thought this is really cool and just couldn't find a place for it that you ended up bringing to Marvel Champions?
No, I don't think so. I find as a designer, and I don't know what this says about me, good or bad, but I tend to, with each new product, think about what it is I want to accomplish in this product. And once I've figured that out, like at the initial like vision stage, I don't stray from that hardly ever. It's like, this is what I want to do. But I mean, I put a lot of thought into that stage. That's the thing. I don't shoot from the hip at the vision stage. I'm very, meticulous in how I'm thinking about, all right, who are the characters? What is the story? All of that. And in truth, I've probably been thinking about it for a while before I even get there, because by the time I'm wrapping up one set, I already know what I want the next one to be. And so once I get into the actual design, I'm just like, this is an oversimplification, but I'm kind of coloring between the lines at that point. Like I've already mapped out the page, and now I'm just filling in the panels, so to speak. So, a lot of this idea of like, oh, I just sit back and think of, very kind of amorphously, is that even the right word? Like just ideas or whatnot. Like I'm trying to grab them out of the aether. I don't tend to do
Like
that
you
a
sit
lot.
down and go, I'm going to make a protection card today.
Yeah, I don't really tend to do that. It tends to be more from the ground up. Like, who is this person? What do they do? Why are they doing it? And then it kind of comes out of that. Occasionally I will get ideas like real creatives do, like just in the shower or right as you're about to fall asleep. Your subconscious will just give you a prompt, which is always fun because it feels a little bit like you've got mail, like just it showed up like unexpected, and you can hardly like take credit for it because you're like, where'd this come from? This is great. So like side quest was one of those things for Lord of the Rings. So if you had asked me were there things from Lord of the Rings that I wanted to bring, I would have said side quest is the first thing. Like I knew from the moment we started Champions, there's eventually going to be side schemes that players bring to this game. And that was kind of fun, just sitting on that and waiting for like, what's the right time to introduce that to the game. But I think other designers really do it different. Like I know you guys got to meet MJ, and MJ is such a creative force that, she just comes up with stuff. Sometimes it feels like almost the opposite of me. Like just thinks of something really fun and then figures out where to do it.
And it's interesting that people have different, the ways that they come at the game and the way they come at the designs, but it ends up all working together. It's really great. So speaking of the designs you've done, do you have a hero that was your favorite to design?
I mean, again, it was probably Cyclops. I'm so boring. I'm just going to keep like pointing back to.
I know you're a Cyclops fan. That's notorious in the community.
Yeah. Well, I just it's such an interesting character. That's I could get on a soapbox about. I'll try not to, but the media almost always misses like what makes him interesting. Because it's so internal, right? It works in comic books. It maybe doesn't translate as well in a a 2-hour motion picture where he has to share the stage with a dozen other characters. But all of that internal, he's racking himself over what he's gonna. That's why he's always planning ahead. And so for me, it was like, yes, he has optic beams, but if you make a character just about optic beams, that's not very exciting. That's not what makes him interesting. What makes him interesting is all the planning. So for me, it was fun to like put the two together and be like, oh, he's got a plan for this guy. And that's how his optic beam works, is I can zap whoever, he's looking at. And that's, determined by the upgrade that he puts down. So that really was fun to design. I mean, Wolverine was really fun to design too, because as much as I'm Team Cyclops, I still love Wolverine. And
Everyone loves Wolverine.
Everyone does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard not to.
And there's a lot of pressure with that too, though, of like,
Yeah.
okay, he better be really good, and his design is not nearly as complicated or intricate. It's just he heals and he does a lot of damage. But it was fun figuring out the role his claws played in that. That he can deal himself some damage to help pay for it, and then it also ups the attack. And then that was fun how it spilled over into, it doesn't just have to be his attacks. It could be uppercut from the core set. And now that's 5 damage and piercing. Like, that's kind of cool. So you can imagine Wolverine uppercutting you with his claws. That's going to do some damage.
I really liked in the Cyclops pack, like the use of the upgrades that attach to enemies as something that speaks to what Cyclops does, but also reinforces using allies, and those kind of combo together on that hero. That felt like a really cool, like, kind of, I don't know, symbiotic mechanic for that pack in particular. That was really good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite heroes to play, and I love that you got the aspects of him of like the tactics and the upgrades and the planning and the leadership, with like field commander, but you also have the blast, and that like I think most people would have thought, he's going to have optic blasts and he's going to like shoot lasers at people, but like the other aspects that are a little harder to get, I think are really well done with his alter ego, kind of getting those back. I think he's really fun and thematic. Yeah. So good call.
Thank you. I should have said Nightcrawler as well, just because he's more new.
Oh, he's like brand new, yeah, just about.
Yeah, and he's a fun story because we didn't think we were ever going to get to do him. Like
What?
the rights to do Nightcrawler were like all tied up with some really complicated licensing, and there was a couple of characters like that. Like Apocalypse was kind of on that no-go list for a while too, and so it was just a stroke of good fortune and great teamwork between Marvel and Disney and our licensing team and everybody involved that made it happen, because Apocalypse is obviously the title character for a whole expansion, and then Nightcrawler is just such a fan favorite. So I had a lot of fun with him too, because that's an interesting power set to try to represent, teleportation in a game that doesn't have any kind of fixed location.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Lord of the Rings might have been easier because you actually have location cards, right? You could just be like teleporting between them. But here it's like we're kind of wherever the story says we are. Yeah. We don't tend to define that too aggressively, and so kind of going back to what I said about protection earlier, it was fun to go, okay, what does a more protection focused hero look like, where he's less about attacking outright and he's more about, I'm gonna get you on the defense. So that I hope people are enjoying him too, because I had so much fun playing him in playtesting. But he was one of those heroes that like shines a lot more like in a 2 or 3 player game.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I just played my first multiplayer game with him, and having the Banff cards spread all over the table, and then just defending like here and there and here, and like doing all these things back to back, did sort of reinforce that being everywhere at once sort of feeling that you should get from Nightcrawler.
Cool.
Yeah, a little bit like Iceman, I think, in that sense. I very much also think he feels better in multiplayer. There's like a lot of things he's doing around the table. And I think, Nightcrawler feels right at home in protection, and he came with some really, really awesome aspect cards. I think people were maybe more excited about those. There have been some great ones that we've been diving in. Do you have an aspect card that you are most proud of designing or most happy with the design for?
If I had to pick just one, it would probably be Sidekick, because that was just another one of those, like, I don't know when or how that idea came to me. I just remember that Tony was out of the office that week, and I was like, Tony, hurry up and get back, because I want to talk to you about this idea I just had, because I was like really excited about it, because I think it sort of came out of leadership felt really well established in terms of I can go Voltron, I can go Ally Swarm, I can just do buffs on heroes and try to get readies. It felt very well established, and I was like, what can I do with the leadership cards, in this pack that will challenge that and offer something new? And I mean, I don't think it totally disrupts all of that, because you can now Voltron a sidekick, so it can fit into that. Or you can go Ally Swarm and just one of them happens to be your sidekick, and that's fine. But I just like that it generated a lot of discussion. People immediately were like, oh, which hero has the best sidekick? And I'm actually, maybe these conversations are happening and I haven't seen them, but I'm a little surprised I haven't heard more about all the shenanigans you can do in multiplayer with Make the Call. Is that only from your Discord pile, though? Maybe I'm messing that up. Does Make the Call let you get an ally out of someone else's Discord pile?
Now you're going to make me look it up on the air here.
See, that's where question. That's where I get Lord of the Rings and Marvel mixed up, because I know that Lord of the Rings definitely had that card.
In any player's discard pile.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so we took it straight out of Lord of the Rings. It was called Stand and Fight in Lord of the Rings. So I guess, so you can, right? So I'm pretty sure the way that Sidekick is worded, it doesn't have to be your signature.
That's correct.
Ally. It's just a identity specific ally. So that's like you could really do some fun stuff with that.
I have not heard anybody do that yet. Actually, I've not. Which
surprised me. I just assumed people, but I think the people that tend to chat online tend to be more solo players, which kind of makes sense because they're going online to find the conversation. Whereas if you already have a local group, I don't think you feel the need to go online quite as much because you're already having the discussions at the kitchen table or wherever you're playing.
Yeah, I think the solo community is overrepresented online. often, and like not in a negative way. Like we're all welcome, we're all playing the same game, but I think there's more solo players online. I think you're right.
Yeah, we have like a product line manager. We have someone that researches our sales numbers and interactions and stuff. Like how many people are on this forum or whatnot. And it was really kind of shocking to find out, like, because there's a pretty large online community for Marvel Champions, very active, but it actually only represents like a very, very small portion of our overall sales. So, I mean, you can't assume that every pack sold equals a different customer. Obviously, some people buy multiples or whatnot, but even accounting for that, it's still a very small sample size of like the overall Marvel Champions community.
Interesting. So, speak to that a little bit more. Like, how much does fan feedback or community feedback filter back to you all as you're designing? Are you hearing what people are talking about, the discussions? You obviously mentioned a little bit you are. And how much does that feature in future designs? Oh, no one's playing this make the call sidekick combo. Let me throw another card at it, see if anybody figures it out now. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, it definitely factors in. Everyone that I know at the studio who works on a card game that's, got regular release cadence is constantly in different media looking for feedback, whether it's podcasts or Twitch streams or, Discord, wherever people are talking about the game. Different people tend to gravitate to different ones, but between everyone, we kind of get them all covered. And then we have our playtesters as well, who are pretty active themselves in those different things, and they're really good about bringing that feedback as well. So they'll be like, hey, we don't know if you saw this thread yet, but people are talking about this. So, it's constant, and I think it's important. You're just immersed in it so that definitely at minimum aware of it. As far as how much it influences design, I think that ties back to the point I was making about the sample size, because and this is tough. And you talk to 3 different designers, you'll probably get 3 different opinions on this. But we're not hearing from the vast majority of our audience. That's the challenge, right? I think it's been a while since I looked at the numbers. It's been like almost a year. But I think a generous estimate for the online community would be like 5% of our audience. That would be like a generous estimate. Now, forgive me if I'm way off. Like I said, I haven't looked at those numbers in a while. But I know it's not anywhere near like half. It's not even half. You know what I mean? It's not even a third. That much I know for sure. So it's actually a pretty modest portion, which means, well, the online community might feel like they're all unified in this view of something. That's just 5% of the audience. What does the other 95% think? And the conundrum there is we don't really know, because they're not contacting us. They're not posting about it. So all we really have to go off of is like sales numbers. You know what I mean? And the sales numbers, they obviously tell an incomplete story. They tell us about a product sold. That doesn't mean that how much it's been played or how much they love it. But I think those numbers would still surprise people who are active online, who have all kind of decided that this is the way it is. I think they'd be shocked to find out that some of the maybe less popular heroes, in their opinion, are actually like some of like the highest selling ones for the game overall. And so we have to grapple with that with imperfect, incomplete knowledge, and go, what does our audience really want? And there's a lot of room for interpretation, and ultimately it's a little bit of instinct. It's like, well, what's true to our vision for the game? That's what I would always try to come back to, is everybody who plays the game wants something different. Some people want it more complicated. Some people want it harder. Some people want it easier. Some people want it less complicated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people want more solo focus. Some people want more 4-player focus. So we have to, at some point, just, say, well, what do we want? What do we think is best for the game? And for me, it's always going back to the original pitch because I was the one that like made the pitch, to Disney just to get the game, green lit. And so it's always going back to that of like, here's a game it's not too complicated, but it's also not like a kid's game, right? It's a game you can play with your kids. We try to keep it lighthearted. We try to keep it fun, fast paced, all this stuff. And it's tough because we'll never really know how well we hit the mark.
Yeah.
We'll hear from people who are like, hey, I love that hero. It's my favorite hero. And then the next person will be like, when are you going to fix that hero? I hate that hero. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's true. I hadn't thought about that. One of the things I've praised on the podcast a number of times is how the game switched to a new release model. And this focus on the hero packs makes it more, I think, easy. Maybe it's easier to get into for people who the online community would probably call casuals, right? They're the people who just like, oh, this game's pretty fun. I play it once in a while among my suite of other board games. I really like Scarlet Witch, but I don't really care about Ant-Man or Wasp. But I really like Nightcrawler, and they have a few hero packs, and they play the precons. And, most of the people who are active online, I think they buy the games. Maybe they play the precon once. They tear it apart. They start building all kinds of weird decks because they've been reading the leaks and the spoilers for a month before the game came out, and they're so far immersed. And you could really sell them anything because we're going to buy all the products. We're so in the game. But I think it's so clever because Lord of the Rings and Arkham both, right, to take those as examples, use this other model where getting cards is more difficult. Like Lord of the Rings, you get a few deck building cards here or there. You never got I couldn't go to the store and just buy Aragorn. I just want to play Aragorn, but I would get Aragorn in a different pack, and there'd be a few cards from some other expansion or adventure pack that I maybe didn't have, and it's just so great, the switch to, if I show up to the game store and some people are playing, I can just buy Scarlet Witch, sleeve her, or not, if you're crazy, and I can just shuffle up and play, right? And that is so great for new players to get in. And I've had that experience with people at shops when my local game group meets. Someone comes in and says oh, I saw you guys meet here on the weekdays. I don't know. And Scarlet Witch is the example I always use because that's what he picked. And he's like, that's my favorite hero. Just bought it at the store, sat down at the game center with us, and was like, I want to learn how to play, and played with us. And that's cool.
That's great. Yeah, that was that should have been my answer to what did we learn from Lord of the Rings. Because that was definitely intentional. That was something that Nate and Boggs and I discussed as part of our pitch. We didn't just pitch the game and the mechanics and how it will work. We pitched the product types as well. And that was everything you just said. It was, we want to get away from this model of I need the core plus an expansion in order to use this pack. Because if you can't find that expansion, well, then you're not going to buy the pack.
Yeah.
And now we just lost a sale by our own fault, So we, again, everything was about lowering the bar of entry. We wanted the game to be simple enough. You could just pick it up and play it pretty quickly. But we also wanted it to be exactly what you said. Where you could just pick up a pack and join a friend. So, I think that's really worked out.
Yeah, and 5 years into the game, right, retailers now have to track 50 SKUs and not 500 SKUs, all the adventure packs and all the different stuff. It makes it easier for them as well to sell the game and stock the game, right?
So, we eventually get to that place where it's they're just so many packs. That's what's funny.
Yeah.
It's the constant give and take struggle in the industry of now our game's successful. We got to figure out what to do with this success. And
I will say at least I love other games. I've been getting into Arkham Horror, but looking at Arkham or Lord of the Rings on game store shelves, it's when you look at it, you can go okay, there's a lot of stuff for this game, but you don't really know what any given pack is as a newbie. It's just there's a bunch of stuff for Lord of the Rings, there's a bunch of stuff for Arkham Horror. But when you come in and look at a display of Marvel Champions, you're oh, that here's in the game, that here's in the game. Oh, you could fight Green Goblin. It tells you a lot immediately about what your options are and how you can get into something. Oh, I want to play Ironheart. Just Boomguy said, get Ironheart. Done. You're there.
Yeah,
that's all it takes.
Yeah. Well, and we only got there because of Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror. It's easy to look back and maybe dunk on that release model now, but the fact is, that was an evolution of a decision that was made before I ever started at the company, to move away from collectible card games at the time. Like, not a lot of people know, like Call of Cthulhu and Game of Thrones were CCGs back in the day. And they decided to, Christian Peterson came up with this idea of like living card game as a way to continue making product for these games, but get rid of the randomized packs. And so, your first LCGs were actually competitive games, right? They were
L5R.
Call of Cthulhu and Game of Thrones. And then Nate came up with this idea for a solo/co-op game, and that became Lord of the Rings. And they're like, let's make it an LCG. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And it was like, well, it's going to need new adventures to play and new hero cards to build decks with. And it made sense at the time. You know what I mean? It made sense to be like, okay, here's your hero packs, right? And you look at, there was the core set, and then there was 6 packs. And they all used like the same encounter sets from the core set. And then later they're like, hey, this is really working. Let's go somewhere different on the map, though. Let's get out of Mirkwood and let's go to like the Mines of Moria. Well, we don't have any Mines of Moria encounter sets, so what do? Well, let's make a big box. Let's make a big, Khazad Doom expansion. It'll have all the sets in there you need. So that's how things just kind of, evolved very naturally at the time. So when we were able to repack that game, right, we were able to consolidate everything and solve that problem we were just discussing, where you don't have to track down all those different products now.
It's made my life as a new Arkham player much more manageable.
Yeah. But Champions, the release model, I think it is stronger, but it wouldn't exist without its forerunners.
Yeah. 100%. So shifting a little bit, if there was one thing that you designed but could go back and change in the game, and it could be anything, aspect, hero, encounters, Hulk, anything really. What would you pick?
Poor
to
man.
Go back and change?
What are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. 5-year anniversary. We're still talking about Hulk.
No, Hulk's a huge character though, right? Like you said about Wolverine. That's a huge that's why people still talk about it.
Well, so I was sort of I was referencing him without talking about him when I was saying how the online community is, very much of one mind of like, this hero is bad. But the fact of the matter is Hulk is one of our top selling heroes. Like, he's in the top 6. He outsells, all these other heroes that the online community would say are far superior and much better. But again, it's incomplete knowledge, right? Because we don't get internet posts from, the kids who enjoy playing Hulk. And so that's the thing, is like, would I go back and do him different? I don't know. Like, that's an impossible question to answer, because he's very much a product of his time and his place. We designed the core set, and everything was chugging along pretty well until we hit like one particular snag, and we had to do a pretty significant redesign to a good portion of the rule system. And it was sort of like, are we going to try to push the release date and give them more time? And ultimately, like, no, we need to stay on schedule. So then it's like, all right, crunch time. Now we got to get all this done. And then it's like, well, we're not moving that first wave back either. So if you remember, there was like 6 heroes in that first wave. And we designed all of those with no audience feedback, right? No one... We had some play testers, but really that's such a small sample size compared to the game at large, So here we've just barely finished wrapping up this core game, and now we need to come up with 6 more heroes, and the clock is running, And so this is where, I feel like I operate okay, because of, like I said, I tend to come up with a vision and stick to the vision. And just, you get it done. But it doesn't leave a lot of time. Like, there's basically not much time with that first wave to do a lot of testing and get a lot of feedback. Like, they were definitely play tested and balanced. So I don't think you'll find, like, I don't know. It was a while ago at this point, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
that's
in,
fair.
in any case, it's like, would I go back and do it different? Maybe if I knew everything that I knew now, but I
Yeah.
didn't then. You know,
Yeah.
so we definitely put our best foot forward. We never like phoned in a single hero design. We never went like, well, whatever. I don't really like Hulk, so let's just make him this way. It's like we understand Hulk's a really popular character. That's why
Yeah.
he made it in the first 6 hero packs. You know, we're very excited for Hulk, and I thought we had a really cool idea of like his stats are bonkers good. You know, he's got twice the hit points of most other heroes, and he's got 3 base attack. Other heroes got to play down Mjolnir or a Hawkeye's bow to get to 3 attack, and he just starts at 3. You know, and I think that's where, like, yeah, hindsight being 2020, we could say maybe we've overvalued these stats, and as a result, like, you know, we would have pumped up some of his other abilities or reduced cost of some of those cards. But at the time, with the knowledge that we had, we're like, this is a pretty big deal, you know, to have 18 hit points. Like, when does he need to go alter ego? You know, like,
Yeah.
he's just a brute.
Yeah.
So
What was the big snafu, if you don't mind me asking, that made you kind of redesign stuff?
It wasn't so much a snafu. It wasn't like we just like screwed up. It was just, you know, game design is an interesting process because I've often described it as like you're trying to piece together a puzzle, but you have no idea what the final puzzle is supposed to look like. You know? So you are, you know, you don't know where the borders are, you don't know what it is you're trying to make, but you're trying to make it all fit together seamlessly. So that's where vision really is important, you know. But you know, I heard an interview. The closest thing I've heard to relate to what it's like to design a game was actually an interview with the band Metric. I was listening to them on the radio, talking about how do you know when a song is done. And their short answer, it was a very long conversation, but their short answer was when you're sick of it.
I was just gonna say, it's like when you're
Like
tired of
when
working
you
on
don't
it.
want to talk about that song anymore. And they're like, because the truth is, you could just continue to tinker with it forever. And they were like lamenting that they're all kind of perfectionists. You know, they're a really talented group, so you know they take it very seriously and they're very passionate about what they do. But at some point, you just got to get it done and release the album. And that's kind of like what the game design process is like when you know, when you work for a studio and you have deadlines and budgets and sales figures and all that stuff you got to take into consideration. So, you know, we basically were chugging along and we were getting feedback from testers saying they'd like us to maybe move more in this direction, and we start to move more in that direction. And then when we brought it before, you know, the executives for approvals, they were like, you have moved too far off the mark. This isn't the game that we were expecting anymore. And, you know, it's probably been long enough I could probably share this rather than be vague about it. The feedback we were getting early on is I think we brought in some Lord of the Rings testers, right? We brought in Arkham testers, people who were used to co-op games already. And they said, you know what I like about Lord of the Rings is when everybody has to pool their willpower together to go on this quest. It's a moment of togetherness. And then you reveal cards and you reduce the progress you make by the number of threat on those cards, right? So it's a moment of tension that you all face as a group. And they're like, there's really not the same moment in Marvel Champions. You're not coming together and pooling all your, you know, attack into one big moment. So we actually pivoted and tried for a minute to like, what if you did? What if you're like, I will commit Captain America to the attack. I'll commit Iron Man to the attack. And then you pool your attack. And then it was like, okay, now the villain is going to discard a certain number of cards and reduce the damage for every boost pip or something. And ultimately, it created more frustration than excitement. Because it was like, wow, we're doing 18 damage. And then you'd flip all these cards and be like, wow, we did 2. You know? And that ultimately just wasn't like a real, yay, feel good moment that we were originally going for. And so I think the executives were right, you know, when they said, hey, I think you've veered too far off target here where you're trying to make it too much like this when what you pitched is really something different, where it's not will this hit land? It's watch me swinging web kick this guy for 8 damage. Pow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they made the right call, but it meant we had to go back and redesign a bunch of cards, and it takes time, and so yeah, it got a little tense, for a minute there with deadlines looming, but I think in the end we got a better game for it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I think I agree with what you said. The executives maybe were on the path there. Well, we're kind of looking back here, right? You've mentioned a few times it's the 5-year anniversary of the game this month, and as we sit here in almost November of 2024. It's been 5 years now, which is crazy to think. How do you reflect on the first 5 years of the game, and kind of like what benchmarks for success did you have going in at the very start when you pitched this game to Disney, when you got out your Trapper Keeper and you read all your notes to Disney? What were your benchmarks for success in 5 years, and have you met those?
I don't know that we had any particular benchmarks for success. I think success for us is always if it sells enough that we can keep making it. That we get to keep making our favorite heroes and designing new scenarios. So we didn't necessarily have benchmarks for success, but we were asked early on by the executive team to put together a line plan that would take us, this far. Give us a line plan that takes us 4 or 5 years into the future. Which was, again, a lesson learned from previous LCGs, where, like, my experience on Lord of the Rings was, well, we just finished the Ringmaker cycle. Where should we go next? And it was like a brand new discussion every time, until I had been on the line long enough that I was like, okay, I'm starting to plan out the next one now so that I can think about the one after that. That was just something that I was able to do as I got really experienced with the game. So we kind of brought that perspective here of like, let's not finish this first wave and then decide where do we go next. Let's come up with a plan. And so I was asked to draft that initial line plan, and I may have spoken about this at other places, but at the time it was like, the MCU was really just taking off, right? It was like the biggest thing in the world. And I said, what seems to be working for them is they release all their movies in phases. They don't just drop individual movies that are like loosely linked. They have like a whole overarching story that each movie plays a part of. And I said, we should release products like that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So, and again, if you have the largest movie franchise in the world drawing attention to your game because they share the same title, it makes sense to sort of piggyback on that and go, well, who are the characters that are household names? It's like the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy. So that was easy to fill that in. It was like, wave 1 Avengers, wave 2 Guardians, and then for funsies, like what we get in Endgame, it's like the Avengers and the Guardians team up to take on this, universal threat. So that's phase 1, 2, and 3. That's your whole Avengers and Guardians arc. But of course, as soon as we got the license, I was like, can we do X-Men? Because that's what I grew up with, that I love. And that was off limits at first. That was, no, sorry. Fox and Disney haven't figured that out yet. So for now, we're sorry, the answer is no. But, through good fortune and, again, great legal work and licensing by everyone involved, eventually they came back to us and said, yeah, tell us your X-Men pitch. And, of course, there's so many good X-Men characters. And the comics I grew up reading it was all the crossovers in the 90s, It was Extinction Agenda, and then it was Executioner's Song, and it was all that. It was always the X-Men and X-Force would team up with X-Factor. They'd all be involved. And so I was like, well, look, Avengers and Guardians, that went off pretty well. We'll kind of do the same thing. We'll be X-Men, X-Force, and then they team up together. X-Men and X-Force take on the big bad. And as it worked out, though, I had just finished the Mad Titan Shadow, and I had this realization of, if we launch into X-Men right after, I won't get to do the X-Men box that I really want to do because I'm still working on this one. We have this leapfrog approach, right? Where Boggs and I at the time were sharing the load, and then it was me and Tony, right? And I'm kind of trying to figure out how I can still do the X-Men because I'm just going to die inside if I can't. And someone completely apart from me, all on their own, I'm sorry I can't remember who it was, suggested, hey, before we launch into another 3-part phase, what if we just had a little one-off, like breath of fresh air, just, something different to surprise and excite people without committing to another wave. And when I heard that, I went, ding, ding, that's exactly what I need. And Into the Spider-Verse had like just come out, and that was like this huge phenomenon. And on top of that, Boggs loves Spider-Man, like more than I do, way more than I do. And I like Spider-Man just fine. But I thought, that's perfect, Boggs. How about you do a Spider-Man box and play with all your favorite Spider people and villains and all that. And of course, he just knocked it out of the park and made a fan favorite expansion, and it was great. So that's kind of how that came to be. And that's kind of, I think people are already kind of guessing is what's happening with, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. now. So we just finished the whole X-Men phase. And now you got Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And who knows what's coming after that, right?
You do.
Like to keep people, well, yeah, I'm a cheat.
So, like, in terms of the game, right, we don't have to get into specifics that you can't discuss, but, like, the next 5 years, where do you see the game going?
That I really can't talk about, unfortunately. I just realized that whole long-winded answer I gave, though, I never really did say in answer to your question about success. I would call that success. We got to do everything on that list that we set out to do, 5 years ago when they're like, come up with a plan. And it was like, it's all there. Now, that plan was always malleable. You know what I mean? That we didn't tackle everything in the exact order that I maybe outlined initially. Like, for example, that Spider-Man box it wasn't on my plan at first. But to me, that's success. Is that here we are 5 years later, and we've made it through, all of this stuff that we set out to do initially. And people are still here talking about the game, buying the game, playing the game, loving the game. That's great. So that to me, that is the epitome of success.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're 5 years in, and the game is as strong as ever. FFG announced that they put more designers on it, and more resources are going into it. That this you can get back to a regular release schedule, which is great. I know you can't talk about specifics, but you did mention licensing a few times, and you don't have to tell me what they are. But are there still characters that you would like to have that you, for whatever reason, can't because of licensing issues?
I honestly don't know at this point. Okay. I don't know what the status is of all the characters. Like you said, I do know what's coming next, and I know fans are going to be very happy and very excited. So we're well aware that we've been keeping people waiting a very long time to see some of their favorite characters, and unfortunately, there's still going to be a wait for some more because there's just Marvel is so rich with great characters. So what I'm hoping is that 5 years from now, we'll still be, hopefully in a positive way, not a negative way. We're 5 years. It's been 10 and we still don't have these characters, but rather 5 years from now, there still be people hungry, for characters they haven't seen yet. Because what does it mean for the game when you're not, when no one's excited for any new characters? They got them all, so. Yeah, I don't want to frustrate people or scare people, but, it's a good problem, right? It's a good problem that there's still stuff people are excited to see, and we're excited to get to them.
And have you ever considered, and if you can't talk about this, you can tell me, but the idea of a second core set has been bandied about for a while online in the community. As you mentioned, that 5% that is obsessed. And I heard rumors, I don't know if it was from you or not, that was considered during the X-Men wave of maybe getting a new core set with new rules, new dials, and all that. Is that something that may come about someday? Is that still on the table, or has that been kind of set aside?
I don't know for certain, right? You can't ever say never, But I know at the time, people were actually pretty excited about an X-Men core set. There was a lot of internal buzz. And then, the decision was made not to do it for reasons that I respect. It's like no one's up there just being a grouch and going, no, you're too excited about that, so I'm not going to let you do it. There's no malice in there. It's a calculus that I don't have all the figures for, because I'm not in all of the sales conversations and all of that background. I just try to make a really fun game, and then I trust the people who do have all the figures and facts to decide what's the best way to move forward with it. So we made our case. We made a pretty solid pitch. We thought, hey, the X-Men might bring a lot of new people to the game, and it might be easier for them if they didn't have to buy an Avengers core set first, but they could just join in here. And we moved forward with that for a while, but ultimately the call was made like, I think there was some concern that, hey, look, this core set's doing really well. Like, the sales are not slowing down. So maybe, like I said earlier, if it's not broke, let's not fix it, and they did, graciously allow me to do 8 hero packs, or sorry, not hero packs, but 8 heroes in that wave.
Yep.
So it was a box and 6 hero packs, and I was glad I got to do it, and I never want to do it again, because that was a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
But it was a passion project for me, so I was glad for the extra work.
Well, of all those extra heroes, is there any hero? So which hero that you didn't design do you wish that you would have designed? Is there one you can think of?
That's a great one. I mean, because I do tend to favor my own stuff just because I get to do it exactly the way I want. We're all opinionated people, and we like what we like, and so that's one of the luxuries of my position, is being able to make Wolverine just the way I imagine Wolverine, or Doctor Strange the way I imagine him. But I do have a deep appreciation for what everybody, and it's not just Boggs and Tony, MJ has contributed to the line, Aaron Haltom, Jeremy Swern, and I'm sure other people have contributed in more passive ways of just, I'd like to see a card that does this, or a hero who does that, and they're all just geniuses. And it sounds like too easy and cheap for me to say that, but they really are. I often feel like my job at the studio is to keep up with these guys. They just so much talent and creativity and passion. So I love. I'll just try to go through, and every one of those guys has made like a terrific hero. Like MJ was so encouraging to me personally with how much she wanted to get involved right from the start. Like before the game was even approved, she was like, "Can I design a hero? I have this really cool idea for, could I do Black Widow?" I'm like, "Yeah," and then came up with all this, the preparation cards, right? And I'm still mad she never made a preparation H card, because that was like the joke we made every day, because we're so grown up in the LCG department, So, but I mean so that was like looking at it going, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's terrific, And then Jeremy did Gamora with like, I play an attack, I get this. I play a thwart, I do that, and that was great. Aaron did a ton of work on Groot with the growth, and I love that. I love the because for me, I always imagine the scene from the movie where Gamora's like hacking at him with her sword, and it's like pieces of bark are flying off.
Yeah,
but he's not down, So I love that, and of course, Boggs, so many great hero designs, but I felt like he really got to express his purest passion on the Spider-Man box. And so I love like Miles Morales with the bringing back the special word. That was a word we came up with in the core set, and with like Black Panther. And speaking of the core set, I got a tip of the hat to Nate, for really championing Iron Man's design. Nate was like, I want to build his suit, and he would so every game, and he loved it, right? Yeah. And now I feel like Tony. Yeah, Tony's designed so many great heroes too. Like, I really like X-23 because I think Tony took the challenge of following up Wolverine with X-23 and went in a totally different direction that still feels 100% Wolverine and is really fun to play. So hopefully I got everyone covered on that list. Those are all great designs.
We talked to MJ a few months ago, and she mentioned, she talked about some of the designs that she did. She mentioned there was this idea, a folder. I don't know if it's a physical folder or digital, or just an idea of where ideas go into, and they come back to them later or whatever. And she did say there was one hero that she really wanted to do and that she didn't get to. But she wouldn't tell us who it is because she hoped that she might be invited back to do that in the future, and she didn't want to spoil the chance of doing that. You don't have to tell us if you don't want to. Hopefully you will.
Oh, it's painful.
Do you know who the hero is?
I want more than anything else.
Do you know who it is?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I can say which hero a former FFG designer would like to design without spoiling any contracts or anything, because it's all just speculation. I'm not promising you any releases. It's not a spoiler.
No.
It's like asking me who's my favorite hero, Cyclops. MJ is a big fan of Cloak and Dagger and had some really novel ideas for how to design Cloak and Dagger. That was like, oh, that's exciting. And so the folder that she's talking about was not a physical folder. It was like a digital folder on your shared drive. And it was like our slush folder. And this is a bit of a sad story because our original slush folder was like full of great ideas, and then we lost that drive completely. No. So that folder is dead and gone.
Oh boy!
And I remember we were all panicked, and then MJ was like, "I think we're okay," because I remember I actually prototyped it and printed it up. I have a physical copy somewhere.
Oh wow! Okay,
real life hero.
Love that.
So I don't know if she still got it, probably, but it's probably lost in a box of other stuff somewhere.
Yeah. When she mentioned the slush folder, I imagined like a physical manila folder with like napkins from when you're out at the bar and you scribble ideas, and late night, you're writing on the back of...
I'm sure that's happened, but typically, as designers, kind of best practice is as you're brainstorming and you think, oftentimes you're working on a hero kit and you've got like 13 out of the 15 cards for that kit done, but you're kind of stumped on the last one or two. You're looking at like, Thor already does everything I need him. He throws the hammer, he summons the lightning, he has the energy of a god, what else does he need? And you'd just be going like, well, what if he did this? And you're like, oh, that's a really cool ability. That doesn't really fit Thor though. So it goes in the slush folder, right? Mm-hmm. Or you're trying to come up with aspect cards. That's where I think it happens more often. It's like, all right, I need a leadership ally. Well, what if this guy did this? Oh, that's really cool, but that's really more of an aggression ability, and I don't need an aggression ally right now. All right, slush it, So you don't ever waste the ideas that you don't use. You just kind of save them up, and then eventually you'll flag a couple as like, oh, that's really good. I'm coming back to that one. And in truth, I was talking about how, like, these designers, I'm trying to keep up with all of them, and I really mean that. They're all so talented. I feel like maybe my strength has been that long-term planning of, I'm often the guy who's like, that is a brilliant idea. That's genuinely amazing, but it maybe doesn't belong in this set or with this hero. Can we slush that and save it for the right hero at the right time, the right pack? And that can be tough because, when you're excited about something, you want to do it right now. And so those are always interesting conversations.
Yeah. Well, today is, when people are listening to this, today is Magneto's release day. So at this point, I think all the cards have been shared, through various channels of, FFG send them out to content creators, and we had some ourselves. And I wanted to ask you about Magneto. I think it's your design, unless I'm wrong. Yeah. And this is kind of the capstone of your passion project, right? Like, this is the end of the X-Men. We don't know if it's forever, but we have heard from FFG that there's licensing issues, so we won't just get a random X-Men mixed into another wave, probably. My kind of question I wanted to ask you, just to reflect maybe on the Mutants and how that went, but I also had specific questions about Magneto's design. Takes heavy influence from the villain design, which I think was also yours. And that was done similarly with Nebula. So it seems like it was intentional. Maybe can you talk me through kind of why you chose to do that and take many of the card titles and abilities rather than design different things, and then just kind of reflect on Mutants? Oh,
I was busy that day.
We got work to do.
We got other things to do. It's nice outside.
It says treachery. We're just going to put a vent on it and go.
So, no, it's not because I'm lazy. I was so excited to do Magneto, and that was the only way I wanted to do him. In fact, like what I was talking about, here's my spreadsheet, my line plan, into the future. Here's my wish list. And Magneto was always on it. I wanted very specifically to introduce him as the big bad in the first mutant wave, because that was my introduction to the X-Men, was Jim Lee's issue number 1, 1991, and you had the X-Men fighting Magneto on the cover. It's just brilliant. And it's also, he's in all the movies, he's in all the cartoons.
Yeah.
So it just made sense. It's the classic, Xavier's mission versus Magneto's mission. But I also knew if we could get Apocalypse, I wanted him to be the Capstone villain that all the mutants have to rally together to stop. Because the Age of Apocalypse storyline is just so iconic, and this vision of a grim future. If we don't come together, this is where we all end up dead. And in the comic books, Magneto leads the X-Men in that battle. So he's often been a hero or allied with the X-Men, but in that story in particular, when fighting Apocalypse, he was key to their victory and led the X-Men through that. So I was like, he'll be the last hero in that wave. And so it is really fun as a designer when you get things just the way you want them, because that's never a given. I don't own these characters, I don't own the license, I'm just over here playing with what they'll let me play with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when things work out that nicely, is really rewarding. So that's if people like it or don't like it, that's 100% on me, because this is what I always wanted to do, and I always wanted his hero to mirror his villain, because he's the same character either way. He's got the same powers, and for me, I like the novelty of, man, he was brutal when I fought him, and he was pulling all this, magnetic stuff out of the deck and throwing it at me. And then I love just the excitement of, I get to do it now? Okay, now I like it a lot better. Suddenly,
now
I
it's
don't
on my
hate
team.
this idea.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, now that he's going to find out what it feels like,
Yeah.
So that was just super, super fun for me to be able to do that. And it does make the design go very quick. And then it's like, then the challenge is, okay, how can I throw in a couple surprises, And I think those got spoiled just this week, with like the wrapped in metal and the, the magnetic missile. Like,
Yeah.
that was like my favorite thing. I don't know if it's the most powerful combo in the game. That wasn't necessarily my mission. My mission was just like, I'm going to giggle every time that I wrap up a bad guy in metal and then throw him at his friend.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to do that? Come on.
Yeah, everybody. That's, if you're going to play Magneto, you're going to play it right? So,
yeah.
How would you then reflect on the end of the Mutants, the passion project that you called it, and how you feel it all came together the way you wanted? Is there anything you missed, or anything that you wish the community was more excited about, or whatever your thoughts are on it?
Let's see. I would just say, like, overall, I'm very, very pleased with how it all came together. I think there was a reason we slowed down the releases. I can't remember what that was, and I feel like the Mutant Wave might have been better received in general if we hadn't have slowed down the releases, because I think everybody overall, the impression I get is people are happy with the heroes and the scenarios, and it's more of just the sense of like, we should have been into a new wave by now, that has people getting a little impatient with mutants, going, okay, yeah, all right, let's wrap this up, let's get moving on to the next. I don't think it's because we didn't hit the mark with the mutants. I think it's because we trained our audience to expect to be onto something different by now. And I know the people that made that decision did not make it lightly. They didn't do it to be like, well, let's just pull the rug out from under Caleb. There's no... It was done for a very specific reason, though I can't speak to that right now. But, they wouldn't have done it if they didn't need to. So that was a little bit frustrating, just because I felt like there would have been a little more positivity around the wave if we had kept to the original cadence. But hopefully in time, once we're like well into the next wave or the one after that, hopefully when people reflect back on the Mutant Wave, the X-Men and the X-Force, hopefully then the conversation's all positive and people are going, yeah, that was actually a really good wave. I enjoy those scenarios. I enjoy those heroes. That's what I'm hoping will, happen. And if that does, that'll be good enough for me.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask, after 6 waves in this last one, or 6 heroes, and then 6 heroes, and we had 8 heroes in the first one, so that's 20 mutants. I have to ask, who was Mutant 21? Who was the first one that got cut that you didn't get to do?
Is it Dupe?
It's brutal.
Just kidding.
Duke?
Don't. No.
Oh, Dupe. I thought you said Duke. I was like,
Oh, Dupe.
Yeah. But Dupe's not really a mutant, right? He's an alien.
I don't even know what he is.
Yeah.
He's this
He's
weird,
Dupe.
like,
He's his
floating
own thing.
bean-looking creature. Like,
Right?
so weird.
There was a lot of mutants that didn't make the cut, unfortunately, and it is a little bit like, sacrificing your children because you love them all so much. Obviously the first one everyone noticed absent was Beast.
Yeah.
They're like, where's Beast? And for the diehards out there, they're like, he's the only one of the original X-Men that didn't get a hero version in this wave. And it's like, well, I would love to get to all of them, believe me. Like, and hopefully we will. Like, that's the plan. Give us enough time. Let's keep this game going. We'll get to them, I'm sure. White Queen was another one, Emma Frost, that I really like and would have loved to done in the game.
+1.
Yeah, there's so many different factors that we take into account when actually like whittling down our list to the 20 that you got, and it kind of gets us to a point where it's like we were really excited about this hero or that hero, but we had to go with a different hero because we'd already kind of filled that role or checked that box, and there was something else we needed to do, differently that a different character would fill better, and so that's where I think, none of that matters to the person who didn't get their favorite hero, and I'm sorry
unfortunately.
for that. I'm sorry for that. There's nothing I can say to probably comfort you other than to say the decision was not made lightly. We don't throw darts at a board with this. It's a pretty involved process, and everyone's involved. It's all the designers, producers, managers, licensors. Everyone gets a say into which heroes are we going to include, when, and where, and why. So, yeah, it is tough. It is tough. You want to do them all and you can't. But hopefully, in another 5 years, we'll have a lot more, and everyone will be that much happier.
I think your roster of mutants is good. If we see Emma Frost in like 4 or 5 years, I'll be perfectly happy with that.
Cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the game is awesome. I got in just after the core set with the Captain America pack is when I got into it. And I've been along for the whole ride. And I think there's a lot of great heroes along the way. And, I'm glad to hear you say that Vision is also your favorite. That's really wonderful to hear. I think I'm one of the few people who Vision is my favorite hero in the game. I play him all the time.
Oh, I'm glad I love Vision. I had a lot of fun designing him.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think it's a dark horse.
Yeah, I honestly felt like I was surprised. Again, we don't always hear from our fans. We hear from some people online, but we don't hear from the vast majority of the audience. So I think the sales are there, but I was kind of hoping to hear more feedback about Vision because I really thought like he's a pretty big deal in the MCU. Paul Bettany plays him brilliantly, and he has a great look. And I thought we brought his powers to life in the game in a pretty authentic way that was unique to the game. And I just never heard a lot about him from after he came out. I was like, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think
session
he's
after this.
a huge favorite. I think some of the rules changes around defending, and we covered this in our previous episode, happened right around his release, which I think impacted his precon, which was protection, and then some of those defense cards couldn't be played in certain forms, and I think that might have hurt things. It was a wave during COVID. I don't know. I can't explain it. I think, but he's my favorite, but I haven't met any other Vision favorites so far. But thank you for creating Vision.
You're welcome. Thanks.
And thanks for taking the time to speak with us today, Caleb. It's really been great to pick your brain about the game that we love. I joke to my wife sometimes that, we have these designers on and I'm really excited. And, I say to her, like, it must be weird for them. They have to hop on a call and talk about something they did at work 2 years ago. I think if someone called me and wanted to know about a spreadsheet I did 3 years ago after my work hours, I'd be like, yeah, I guess. I don't know. But it's a little different as a game designer, obviously. So,
sure.
But thanks for taking the time. It's been really great. And I've been to all the kind of heroes so far, so I'll be back again in the spring. And hopefully, we can meet you there if you stop by again and get a game in.
That'd be great. Yeah, let's make it a plan.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening this far. Please leave a comment down below or send an email, winninghandpodcast@gmail.com. If you have follow-up questions for Caleb, maybe we'll get him back sometime if there's enough of a demand. And we look forward to speaking to you again, Caleb.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Take care.